Hello and welcome to Wonkette's Labor Day or Day Before Labor Day Spectacular. That is definitely being recorded on the day before Labor Day. Oh, I just winked successfully. That's exciting. I'm Robin Panacchia, and this is my lovely and talented coworker and co-host, Stephen Robinson.
Hello.
And you are also here, we assume, our
So
audience.
everyone is enjoying their Labor Day holiday and their whatever people do, I guess, cooking out and enjoying
Having
all
their
that.
last chance to wear white shoes.
Yes, which is I stand by that. But Robin, could
But
you?
have you ever murdered anyone for wearing white shoes after Labor Day is, I think.
No, that seems excessive.
Okay. So what you're saying is you're not Kathleen Turner in Serial.
Serial Mom. That is actually one of my favorite movie. I was a big Kathleen Turner fan when I was in high school from that whole period, and it was kind of devastating that she had some career setbacks due to her health. She's incredibly talented, a great comedic actress, both in that and I think
Oh yeah.
Range.
And much like Our Lady Bebe Neuwirth, a hero for ladies with very deep voices.
Oh yes.
Like,
But that was more for me. Her Jessica Rabbit was the voice, even more so than obviously the being drawn bad. It was that voice was in.
yeah, I had plenty money, 1922.
That's very good.
Thank you. I actually do know the whole song.
We could do that later for bonus content.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a bit
just
about
the entire Peggy Lee oeuvre?
Can you tell us a bit about sort of the history, not just history of Labor Day, but more of like why we have this, why we have unions to thank for even weekends, and also like how it's actually being kind of scaled back. Like we're actually sort of losing a lot of these protections.
We absolutely are. The funny thing about Labor Day is it is actually a super whitewashed holiday. Originally, the actual Labor Day and the Labor Day that everyone else in the world celebrates is on May Day, May 1st, which is a far more important holiday for like actual labor activists. It is the anniversary of the Haymarket incident, and so people across the globe choose to honor that. And it actually happened, in Chicago, in the US, but we're like, no, that's too radical. Like they were actually like, oh, we don't want to encourage people to be like, scary anarchists. So they wanted people to stop celebrating May Day. And instead they created Labor Day to celebrate workers in like a less radical, more family friendly kind of way, with picnics and mattress sales.
And that's just I always find that very fascinating, the history of it. And so now we kind of, there are people probably working Labor Day right now, and there are people.
Oh, yeah. Well, the original concept of May Day was that it was supposed to actually be a general strike. Like, wait, explanation, a general strike is when literally everyone stops working in order to show the power of, labor and why people actually do need the little people to do their jobs in order to survive. Because, generally speaking, people sort of like to pretend like, oh, we can be totally fine without all of these people doing their jobs. They're superfluous. And then we found out during the pandemic that no, we actually probably need minimum wage workers more than we need literally anyone else, including like incredibly attractive bloggers. Like,
I know was painful to realize that. So and that's interesting because kind of, not to sort of put a religious stamp on it, but a holiday that is kind of, oh, I have to actually prepare for it, make sure that I'm not going to be able to get takeout this day. I'm not going to be able to
Yeah.
this is a day where everyone is at home, but nothing's really happening. I mean, even Christmas isn't that way anymore because people
Oh yeah.
complain
Well, I
hours
mean,
is
for a
shorter.
while they were like starting on Thanksgiving. They were like for Black Friday, they were telling workers that they had to come in at like 4 p.m. And that has stopped, thankfully, but mostly just because brick and mortar retail shopping has kind of stopped, not because they suddenly started caring about workers.
Yeah, you could just do all of that online now, but it's not. Although some people insisted on camping and I just interject, I don't want to bash a lot of the people who participated in that sort of stuff because
No, yeah.
I've done this as well, being like, what's wrong with you people? But some of the times the folks leaving their family, not just the workers, but the people doing it, is just so like
Well, because that's the only way that they can afford to get nice gifts for their family. And I get that. I just really hated working Black Friday.
Well, I can imagine it's brutal. So you did work Black Friday, you said?
I worked a bajillion Black Fridays. So many Black Fridays. And it is just an absolute human nightmare. Like man, people throw stuff at you. Although when I worked in retail, I got stuff thrown at me a lot. Like people are just the customer is always right, and I can hit you in the head with the purse is what that means.
Speaking of your past retail as well, because I just want to ask a question about this because Ted Cruz, his gross comments about the slacker barista, that whole stereotype or whatever. There's a lot of folks who have in this whole, as I said, the straw man Diane Chambers thing, which is, but what is there's nothing really necessarily bad about getting a degree, either creative arts or acting or whatever, and let's say most of your job is working in retail or baristas. And a lot of the actors I know, because of all working, what they call the term working actors, it's like, again, it's a very small percentage that's Robert Downey Jr., like making tons of money. A lot of folks, you have other jobs, and it's always been like when they made fun of the guy from the Cosby Show for working at Trader Joe's, something is somehow demeaning, and somehow you wasted both this money and this time unless you're making all this money. And that just seemed, did you ever feel that pressure? And it's because it seems very gross. Everyone's like, why, you're such a smart lady, why are you doing this? As opposed to, people need this job, people need someone to do this job.
I was actually very happy with my work, and what I was doing. If you want the truth, I actually, for a long time, as much as like my original plan was really to sort of write on the side and continue working in fashion, whether in terms of dressing, like working retail, managing stores, or dressing people, because I actually do really enjoy it, which is like such a crazy thing to say, but I love dressing people. It is a great time for me, which is strange for a girl who never played with Barbie dolls, but like it is my favorite thing. And I don't know, I think I had such an ego in a certain way where I was like, obviously I'm brilliant, everyone knows this, I can do whatever I want. But I was also in my 20s, so some of us are overconfident at that time.
And it's interesting because in the theater community, and there's some younger folk, and I've speaking to some younger people, there's this idea of like, they were defining success for themselves by never having to, what they called a day job.
Yeah.
Again, aside from that being, it's a huge reach for a lot of people to ever kind of do that. But the other side is like, well, it's not the worst thing. There are jobs you can do, and it's fine. And kind of like creating a sense of, because to me, I've always sort of wanted to work and kind of create jobs that are much more flexible for the arts. So so instead of like being Best Buy Theater, putting your name there, or being the, Banana Republic Theater and saying, oh, here's how I contribute to the arts. Hey, why don't you actually have a flexible schedule? Or, help you so that people can, so when someone comes to you and say, oh, I need to rehearse at this point, I'm going to be in the shows. Oh, that's awesome. And because in my own experience, I had an opportunity like that when I was working in legal publishing, and that was a space where everyone there was either an actor or a singer, and there was flexible. I actually came in because I was a temp for someone who was doing Miss Saigon for the summer, and it came back, and then they hired me for something else. But it was like, oh, that's wonderful. And I feel like that's something that we kind of need to do.
Oh, absolutely. Well, part of the problem is that so many of these, retail stores, fast food places, etc., have sort of they don't like to have flexible schedules. Even though your schedule changes every week, they basically want to keep people on their toes. I worked at stores where you literally would not get your schedule for the week until 2 days after the week had started. One of the first things I did when I started in management was I did everyone's schedules like a month ahead of time, because it wasn't actually that hard to do. For the most part, you could do everyone's schedule in and around the same thing, like every week, like any other job, like our jobs. And, it wasn't, but part of the reason they do that is so that people cannot find other jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they don't want you going off and interviewing. And, when I was at the store I was at, I couldn't go in for interviews anywhere because, sorry, I'm losing track of my words here. I couldn't go in for interviews anywhere because I never knew when I was working, because I could also be called in at a moment's notice. So it was not great in that way. But again, I did like dressing people.
And there was no extra compensation for being called in.
We were kept at 38 hours specifically so that the owner didn't have to give us health insurance.
Yeah, that was another show. My wife was away again for work, a work thing, and so whenever my wife is away, I wind up discovering an old TV show. So Superstore, which I think people are aware
I love Superstore.
Of. I wound up binging a bunch of like Lauren Ash in America. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I was binging for their episodes.
She's so great, and I want her to be in like everything.
I think you would appreciate her as having a great voice. I always thought of her as like, this is a very Robin-esque role because of the voice and the persona. She's great.
Yeah.
Very funny.
I also have such a crush on that boy. I can't think of his name.
Jonah, the guy played Jonah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I crushed on him when he was on Mad Men and Drop Dead Diva, which is a show that I absolutely watched from.
I'd recognized him, and I was like, what do I know him from? It's like, oh, right. Those are, as soon as you mentioned it, I saw him in those things. So, but they
darling.
But they'd mentioned that in the show, like how they keep everyone at 38 hours and so forth. And that's kind of one of the, I will call out Amazon for this. So in Seattle, when I lived in Seattle, I was auditioning we were auditioning for a play, and this one lady, she was excellent. We wanted for it, but she worked at Amazon. And so the idea, of course, is she thought, because she had majored in engineering, I'll major in engineering and I'll go and get my Amazon job, and then I will, I'll be able to live in Seattle and also pursue my artistic realms, because I'll have life outside of this. They could not guarantee, like, basically our asking is just like, oh yeah, we can schedule it. You could just do weekends. We could have someone on, your Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're running that. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then for rehearsal, if you need to come in, well, we usually start at around 6. Sure, if you need to come in at like 7:30, it's fine. They couldn't, she went to her boss, was like, no, we can't guarantee that. We can't guarantee that you can, she was coming to work at like 8, but we can't guarantee that you will be able to leave the office to report to anything else by 7 or 7:30. And we can't guarantee that we won't need you for projects or anything on weekends for a 4-month period. We can't even, aside from the fact you should be working this way.
But just don't make other plans. is, just the way so many jobs in general operate these days and have been operating, and they're just now getting like a small amount of pushback on the idea that like, oh, people might want a work-life balance, and they keep trying. The thing that I do love is that, like, man, these people keep trying. They keep trying to put out these like op-eds being like, work-life balance. What kind of commie bullshit is that? No one wants, like, oh my God, these millennials and Gen Zers, they want a work-life balance. Learn to work hard. Like, it's all such bullshit. But like every time they do it, there's like massive, massive pushback. Whereas I think like, 15 years ago, it was really just like me yelling in my corner, being like, no, this is bad.
Well, I mean, businesses had, and again, the unions have fought for this, was the 8, 8, and 8. 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of your own time, and 8 hours of work.
8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, 8 hours for what we will was the official slogan.
Oh yes, exactly. And none of that was from the, they advocated for that. I think the only thing that was sort of corporately pushed was, crazy big and anti-Semite. Henry Ford realized that people actually needed a day off to buy his cars. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, we'll let them have Saturdays so they can go out. So the modern Saturday, we do have the crazy anti-Semite to thank for that in part, along with activists.
No, he was smart in the way that, the whole like, oh, we need to pay people enough to buy cars, which was, just a thing that makes sense if you are a car manufacturer.
And you need to have time off to buy my products, because if you are just working.
However, most of his labor stuff was also very, very directed at like union busting. Like he did not want unions. So he tried to like make things okay, send everyone to their square dancing classes.
Well, sort of union busting through. I mean, Howard Schultz, the Starbucks guy, his union busting is just sort of, I'm just a complete creep. I'm not even gonna like try to give you some sweetness to kind of make you forget about this or like whatever. It's just like, no, I'm not changing anything. And so of course people are like, we can't take this anymore, and they risk. But like the lack of any kind of, because if you can't count on, this is my day, because also, and I say this as a parent, part of that is like, I want to tell my kid, okay, yeah, we're going to the park tomorrow. I'm going to do this tomorrow. Not that I'm going to be called off. I need to look at my phone. I need to be, this is our time. And so I give this example of my dad, who worked in a plant in his life, but it was structured. I mean, he worked a lot of overtime for us and all that. But again, it was structured. So he was working a 12-hour day. We knew it was a 12-hour day or a 16-hour day. But when he was doing on his weekends, it was his weekends. He didn't have to pick up the phone. Sometimes he would take extra shifts, but it was like, he didn't have to. And we could be like this. And also he was very present, to use a modern term, but very present on days off, on his time off. So the family vacation was just that. It wasn't like I need to get to a phone or get to or whatever, or be paged. I mean, granted, like a lot of people at higher levels of corporate have had that. But it's just not a sustainable thing. And I have to say, I find this whole thing that they've been sort of saying, because they want to try to get people back into the office for their own reasons, for the real estate purposes or whatever. It's kind of this whole thing of like, oh no, we need Robin and Steven have to be in the office together because they go buy the water cooler, and then they'll have all these grand ideas for the company. But they have all these grand ideas and all of this, and it's just like, okay, well, you don't pay Robin enough to live within walking distance, of the office. And she's going to have to, you're her 2-hour commute for the privilege of coming in and like typing it, all of that.
And sitting in
you don't pay her enough.
I mean, we wouldn't do anything different at all if we had to go into an office. Like, our job would still be our exact same job, regardless of where we were.
And some jobs might be different, but I think a lot of them, they should be, after the pandemic, the technology piece, like, well, this is just absurd. Like, why would you just sort of sit there and just be typing
Yeah.
Like just
Just
typing
gonna,
a
yeah.
room together.
Well, what happened was one thing that I do actually find very interesting about like the trajectory of our industry is that originally it was all remote work. Like everyone was working from home. Then all of a sudden, certain sites started buying like really super fancy uh, offices. I think Vice was like one of the first places to have like this super cool office in Brooklyn or whatever. And because like all the Gawker people originally worked from home, everyone did. Um, and then they started like spending tons and tons of money on these like super crazy fancy real estate spaces in Manhattan. And then all of a sudden, the only people who could, work in online media were people who were already like fairly well off and could like live in New York City or live in DC and or LA and go into the office there.
Yeah,
And it's
completely
I
new.
honestly think it's been like a huge, huge, huge detriment because part of the problem with media in general is like I'm not saying like coastal elites or whatever, but like you need perspective from people like all over. You need perspective from people who are not rich. Like
Yeah, well, who can afford to live? And when I worked in publishing, and I remember chatting, and I won't name the publication, but it was, and they were fairly upfront that they paid ridiculously little. Like, and this is mid '90s, but still ridiculously little, $20,000 to work to live in New York.
yeah,
The expectation was just it was deliberately, if you want to make sure only a bunch of Jared Kushner's work for your publication, only
absolutely.
because I can't afford to do. I don't have an allowance anymore, or certainly not the allowance of like my dad's paying my rent, which a lot of folks were doing. That's how only you could like live in those cities and get these jobs, and it's pointless. Like, and at the time where you needed to actually be there. It's like, oh, I want to write for magazines. The only thing that's my best option. I couldn't continue living in Athens, Georgia, where I was living. And otherwise my path would have been working at a
Yeah.
small publication doing that. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want to go to New York. I was willing to accept those hits, but it's just brutal. And I don't get to, I just know it so infuriates me. Like New York real estate. If you ever watched, I unfortunately I watch way too much of like the apartment therapy or whatever. They show the people like the 300 square foot apartments and everything, and it's in New York.
I've actually never seen. I prefer my reality TV like way trashier.
No, this is just the Fraser
Like
Crane and
that's
me
so
loving
wholesome.
watching. Like I watched this one guy who does Architecture Digest. He'll do the history of um, New York apartments. So that resulted in my turning to my wife last night at like 11 o'clock. And then we wound up ranting about the prejudice of home. So like because she had lived in the
I'm
brownstone.
sorry, it's just saying the phrase "architectural digest" is just the most on-brand Stephen thing that it's ever. Like,
I just love, but the idea apparently like there was like,
huh.
you ever seen the brownstones? You have the first, because the parlor was very up, you have the stoop up to it, and then there was like what was also the basement apartment was really the servant entrance, but the parlor entrance was above because when built, you didn't want to have to like walk through horse manure to get into the
That's
house.
literally how that is like quite literally how my parents' house is. I think I mentioned this before, like when I was still there. There's a servant's entrance
But
that
what
goes
is
from the
wrong
kitchen.
why should anyone have to walk through horse manure? Like, it's just a fundamentally
Yeah. I don't
horrible
know
thing
if it
about
was that. I think it was just like, oh no, we can't look at the servants because it'll make us
like,
sad.
well, we don't want to look at our servants, even though these people are feeding us.
Yeah.
But I can't bear to
like
look at them.
awkward, like
It's so icky and
like
terrible.
almost like they were people or something.
In the tenement buildings where people were like, the ones where you have like the bathtub and a kitchen type thing, and it's all like there's no hallway, it's all one room, like that. And like they were literally before the zoning codes, there was like no operable windows. They didn't have to actually have operable
Yeah.
windows or whatever. So like 30 people in a big room with no windows, you get disease. It's like people were dying. And it's just like, it's horrible. It's like, you read it's like, this is horrible. Like everyone's living in these sort of, you know, wonderful apartments where other people are just like who make their lives possible are like living in squalor. And what's sort of tragic, and I'm sure you're aware of this history, but I just find it fascinating. I was reading it last night, was the attempt of public housing, the projects was like sort of, you look, it's, oh, well, it's kind of like the suburbs will have like these nice little, you know, lawns and fountain areas and public spaces and building. But then, of course, thanks to our buddy Reagan and other, prior to that, it's like, oh, well, let's stop funding that or repairing it and it'll fall apart. And no one wants to be near public housing because we believe poor people are inherently terrible. And it's just so, it just infuriates you. It's just like, you don't, why do we don't have to do this? We could actually make it better for everyone, and it's not that hard.
Man, you should see the area. Like, I live literally down the street from Cabrini Green. And like, it was still up when I moved here originally. I don't know if people were still living in at that point, but I think so. I think some people still were. And they've made it so, the whole area is so fucking bougie now. Like, oh, you couldn't have done that before. Like, you couldn't have made this like a livable place for people.
No, like poor
no, that would have been like crazy.
Want to demonize poor people. But one of the videos in apartment therapy was this, it's a she was a music teacher in a New York private school, mind you. And she was like 40 years old, living in 219 square feet, in a Hell's Kitchen, her, you know, bath, you know, tub in a thing, in a, barely meeting the Geneva Convention, you know, tub in the but next to the sink, have to climb like a loft above. She's sleeping, but it's not enough. It's like she's living in an Amtrak roomette. And of course, they show her, you know, continuing to teach the kids during the pandemic. So she's in that during the pandemic the whole time, and she's remotely teaching the kids. So she's one of those people, the teachers, of course, were treated like garbage for the past couple of years. And you know, to me, it's, I feel like, I don't know. And it's something I feel very important about, and while ranting to my wife about this at 2 a.m. in the morning, but like, I feel like everyone who touches our life should not live in squalor.
Yeah, well, I mean, not even that. I think what we don't realize as Americans is, you know, even after the pandemic, even after essential workers, is that like we actually need everyone to survive. We need people to, you know, work every job there is. And so if we need those people need to be making a living wage is like the only freaking sane option.
Or real affordable housing, like the private school teacher, she's teaching, you know, let's say a lot of well-off kids, most likely they can afford private school, you know, and she's living this way, and no one's thinking like, hey, maybe we could do a little bit better here. It's just a very, and when everyone says living wage, they scoff at it, and it's just sort of
like, oh, that's silly that you would want to live. Like, there was this op-ed in USA Today on Friday, which is definitely not today, being like, oh my God, these people are looking for jobs on what is it, Indeed or whatever, that instead of paying $15 an hour, which is what they were asking for in 2012, literally is when the Fight for 15 thing started. Now they're looking for things that pay $20 an hour, and that's going to contribute to inflation. So what if these people just like suffered through and just sucked it up and worked jobs that don't pay them enough, and then inflation would never happen. Like,
what is this? I'm trying to understand an inflationary argument. I'm trying to be, but it's just sort of, well, human beings shouldn't suffer to make, like, I should probably pay a little bit more for milk if it means that other, you know, and obviously you have to balance that because everyone's paying more for milk or whatever. But the solution to inflation, full stop, can't be that we suppress wages on the poorest people.
Well, that is literally what we have been doing, and it affects basically the entire world. Like, the reason why, you know, there have to be sweatshops in Bangladesh and in China is because American consumers need things to be a certain amount of cheap. Like we can't, it's actually expensive to make clothes. Like it is not cheap to make clothes and produce them and then sell them. Like it's not actually inexpensive, which is why people didn't used to have like anywhere near as many clothes as I have, which I feel very guilty about. But
that was also an Architectural Digest. They showed like the classic six, so you had the servants' room.
Yes.
Why in those apartments there's usually one crappy room because God forbid you treat this person with dignity or shit. Like give her a decent room, but no, it's really small. But they didn't really have big closets in those old days because there's people just even wealthy enough to have servants and live in these nice, New York homes. They just didn't have as much clothing because it was still pretty expensive to make clothing. It was like always everything kind of.
We did, and like it's not like we didn't have sweatshops. We just had sweatshops here, and then we had the International Ladies Garment Workers Union.
Those darn unions. Everyone was like, everything's best if just poor people could just, children could also work long hours, and we could just crush poor, have poor people become miserable. But they'll too get rich. Maybe their children will be rich. Like everyone loves the story is just we will have this twisted system, but for everyone living in tenements and dying of disease and whatever, maybe a couple of them will somehow, get into the next class, and then their kids might get to the next class and be a classic six. And then there'll be the TV show, like they'll driving.
Well, because this is the thing, people love that narrative.
Here's where I used to live in the projects. Now I no longer. And even folks in the projects would be like, oh, wow, that guy got out. And it's that term of getting out.
That's how my dad's situation is really. People will be like, good for Dante. He, really like got out and, did some stuff. We're very proud of him. And that is a thing, but people are so in love with this narrative and this idea that we should arrange everything in order to build good character, even like though it does not actually do that in most cases, or build, it's like, oh, well, we can't pay people enough to live because then they won't work hard in order to earn enough to live. Or, we can't give people health insurance because then, they won't work hard to get health insurance. And we can't, pay for homeless people to live somewhere because, again, we need them to build character. And none of these things actually succeed in doing that. Like, we do everything in the most ass backwards way, like disorganized way possible in order to hypothetically improve people's character and so that they're hard workers and not lazy and they're not spoiled. But who's doing okay are the actual spoiled people.
Oh yeah. Well,
spoiled people are doing just fine.
There's no sort
they're
of
okay.
Anointment trials for rich people, like on To Date Myself, the TV show The Thundercats, where Lionel, the leader, had to fight the other Thundercats and prove he was fit to rule. So it's like, okay, you have the hereditary title, but you've got to be faster than Chitara, stronger than Panthro. And I'm watching that. It's like, well, how could he do that? But he did because he worked hard. But anyway, but the whole point being that you have to sort of prove yourself. We don't even do that. It's just like we just have these, like.
We love nepotism in this country.
Donald Trump Jr., who literally he's only ever worked for his father, and we know that we all know he'd be homeless without. He's very dumb, just toxically useless and damaged, which is partly his father's fault. So,
and not in a sexy way.
No, he's still got the beard. Like he's like, what is going on? He's just like a useless human being, and that's what happened. Like often a lot of folks who have been working class who did make it, you get into these environments. There is the point of like, oh, well, I'm special. And some people saying, oh, you're special. And it's certainly flattering. But a lot of us look around and it's like, wait a minute, this guy is he's here. He didn't have to work for it, and he's really dumb. It's not like sort of the Obama theory I would used to whenever I would apply when I was looking for jobs, like in tech or something, and you'd go onto their website and their stats site, and it's all a bunch of white bros. And it's like, well, if they've never hired a black person before, like how am I gonna break? Like, I'm sure other black people have been as competent as I am. If they haven't hired one yet, I don't think they're gonna hire me. Like, I'm not the Obama of this situation. So you have to kind of almost feel like you're the Obama.
Yeah.
Every time you point, that's a sucky feeling, I'll tell you. Like to ever job is like, well, I'm not if I'm Barack Obama, maybe I will break through whatever has prevented them from hiring.
Although here's the thing. Part of the problem is like, in that case, getting interviews. Like to begin with, like if you have a name that sounds black or sounds like even unpronounceable, you are less likely to get called back for an interview. This is ridiculous, but I actually got called back for interviews for things by leaps and bounds just when I shortened my last name to Penn. Like, because I'm like, people just literally did not even want to try to pronounce my last name. But part of the problem is that people just write people off and don't give interviews. My dad actually, speaking of him again, made people's bonuses their year-end bonuses contingent on if you don't interview like this, at least interview this amount of people of color and women, you're not getting your yearly bonus. And they suddenly had at his place of work, Black people and women after years of it just being white dudes. And yeah.
Well, Blake Masters, the Arizona Republican Senate candidate, who's terrible, would have said, oh, this is all, well, they didn't have the term woke for it then it was PC, but it's all, and it was quotas, and quotas are wrong. You only hire the best people through, of course, your own systemic biases. But he had talked about the idea of obviously.
But if people aren't even getting interviews, then you don't even know who the best is.
Exactly. Well, and he had said, well, everyone knows that Kamala, because he would refer to her by her first name because they're tight, the vice president, obviously was not qualified. She was only chosen because she's a Black woman. And so aside from the inherent offensiveness and racistness of that statement, it's just ridiculous,
because we've had so many of them before.
Yes. Well, what you don't for one, how is Blake Masters defining qualified? Even he wouldn't have liked Pete Buttigieg either.
He doesn't vice president.
He doesn't like liberal. So her being liberal is not the issue. So if he thinks that she's not, yes, like Dan Quayle, vice president is usually, and I've argued this, and a lot of Harris supporters have track on this, was there's a reason based on precedent that Biden probably chose Kamala Harris over, say, Stacey Abrams. Because you don't want to be overshadowed, and you want she fits the standard vice presidential role of I'm not the star. And because when everyone was saying, oh, maybe if Hillary wins in 2008, Barack Obama would be your vice president. There's no way she would have.
No, that wouldn't. No, you don't have someone who's super compelling be your vice president. Generally speaking,
no, you just you wind up with the Sybil show, and
wait, did you say Sybil? Sybil Shepherd, her TV show with Christine Baranski?
Yes, she was very upset. And a lot of critics at the time, I was one of them, said, "Look, I know you don't like that she's a breakout star, and Christine Baranski's funnier than you, and guys, college age guys like Stephen Robinson tune in just to watch Christine Baranski."
Wait, no, hold on. Wait, what? In what? Hold on, I don't.
Sybil Shepherd was very
upset. Was that a thing? Colleges were yes.
That Christine Baranski was obviously the breakout of the show.
I know. I mean, Christine Baranski is one of my personal heroes. But wait, hold on. College dudes were give me some of that Christine Baranski because
no, just me. I was saying I really one was why I was watching every week for her. Christine Baranski. I
Okay.
adored her. But she was very upset. And I was always, I remember writing something in a college paper, just like when one of the scandals came out and she being upset, it's like, just cash the checks. Like the show's doing well. It's still called Sybil.
Yeah.
Just show
I
up.
didn't even know that was a thing
Did
at
you ever see
all.
the movie Girl Interrupted?
Very not hep to the Sybil behind the scenes drama.
Did you ever see the movie Girl Interrupted? It's Angelina Jolie won the Oscar. You're often shocked that
I was a teenage girl in the 90s.
This stuff. I will otherwise make references to things that you've never heard of. So I have to I can't trust myself as to what normal.
It's just the West Wing and romantic comedies.
So so when the film was released, obviously Winona Ryder is a star. Winona Ryder was a big, huge star at the time, or relatively huge.
Yeah.
And so the posters, the images was like Winona Ryder's face in Girl Interrupted. And then Angelina Jolie started getting all this, the press for it and got nominated and eventually the Oscar. And then then they released it. It was like, Winona Ryder's face was kind of here. And then Angelina Jolie's face was like right in the side. It doesn't make any sense anymore. You know what I mean? Because obviously the design of the poster was about just one woman's face, whatever. It doesn't really work to have superimpose another woman's face over it and kind of shove out of the background. But it was like a weird thing of okay, yes, this is our new star now, Angelina Jolie. So, but again, just cash the checks, Sybil Shepherd. Sorry for this diversion. I was I'm fascinated. But that was the VP thing. There's and I feel that there are a lot of Harris supporters who think that Biden was gonna pick the Christine Baranski for his administration. No one, very rarely, no president picks deliberately.
Well, I think that what people wanted was for him to do one term and then pass it off to her, is what it seemed to me like what,
if that
those people had hoped would happen.
If that was legitimately his goal, then he would have picked Stacey Abrams. That seemed obvious. That to me, when he chose Harris, that was clearly him stating, I am running for 2 terms.
But also, here's the thing with Stacey, the Stacey Abrams or Karen Bass, who was also considered, the fear was that, oh no, it's going to look like he's pandering to the left. They're too liberal. They think people should have health care and stuff. That's too radical. It's crazy.
Yes.
It makes too much sense. We need to do things in the crazy way.
Well, back to labor. Sorry, but back to labor. One thing, because we've been talking earlier about this, and I didn't mention it because you're people moving and bringing it back. So I had written for the AV Club for a while. I stopped, particularly when they changed management, and the someone who private equity was terrible about the company, and so down. But they sort of basically told the staff, including my editor for the viewers as well.
Yeah, who is one of my best friends.
You guys need to move to LA, uproot your lives, move to LA, and be right where the action is, as if it's 1965 or something, right? You need to actually physically live here. And people were considering it. Okay, I guess it was okay, well, Chicago's a little, are you going to pay us at least to and I say considering, I mean, the union was it's a good faith.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
no, because they weren't going to pay them more.
No, we won't. So your standard of living will dramatically drop. You leave your family behind and friends and come live here for nothing. So people said no. And I just found that one, I felt it was.
And then Robin has to pay twice in rent.
Yeah, I felt like that was past. The term is passive termination, deliberately trying to fire people by forcing them to, just say okay, F it. And so I found that entirely corrupt. I want no part of it, but it makes no sense. What is anyone thinking that oh, we have to have people, the best and the brightest is in LA and New York, which isn't true. It's not like those states, it's not like avocados, right? It's not like they grow writers in those states. So they're they're native. It's there's some sort of, they are generally people from all over the country move to New York because we say that's the only place you get to be a writer. It's not like New York grows great writers or California LA grows great writers or great actors or whatever. It's just understood that you've got to go to those places if you want a career. And
but like we've cut off so much of the pipeline to becoming a writer. Like all of the like newspapers are gone. All of the local newspapers are gone for the most part, except for like large cities. People don't.
Right.
Pardon?
The independent arts
publications. Yeah, the indie papers like, the Phoenix, I don't know how like active they are, the Village Voice, the Reader, like all of those things that used to be pipelines into writing as a career are gone. And now it's just like, hey, do you have rich parents? I remember a while back, I think it was in Bustle, there was this article like, how I'm making it at $20 an hour in New York City or something. And then it's like, my parents give me lots of money.
Well, it's such a disconnect.
That was like she put her budget in the thing. I forget. I think it was Bustle. It was the most insane article because she was like very serious on how thrifty she is and like how she's actually making it work. And then it's like, and my parents give me a $2,000 a month allowance.
Yes.
Like normal people have.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complete disconnect. I've told the story before of like when I was interning in a magazine in New York, when I first moved there, there was this one lady, ridiculously wealthy, and she, lived in a wonderful Soho place her parents were paying for. And then there was her, a colleague who just hated her. And it's like, well, I have to live with my aunt in Forest Hills. Like, well, I would love to have an aunt. Can I live with your aunt in Forest Hills? We don't like it. Yeah. I mean, I don't have to worry that if I lose it, I can float for a few days. I'm not paying rent. That's tremendous.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so a lot of just those connections, and it's like every story is like, it's so overwhelming if you want to be a writer. Because you look at like, okay, well, how did this guy get this? He had he wrote this manuscript or play or script. How did it happen? Oh, well, his uncle worked at a New Yorker. There was always some connection. It's all sort of class based, which is sort of fascinating. I think whenever people talk about at a political science economics professor in college, she described of how middle class is sort of not what you are making as an individual. That's not your income. It is about your social class, the people the people you grew up upon, even more so than friends you met in college. Because like friendship it's not like family. And so and those connections and how it's easy to lose everything. So no matter how hard you worked, if your path is like you could have gone to the best colleges, gone to Harvard, gone to Yale, you're lawyer, stockbroker. If you lost your job, you're not still in that class. Because you're most likely going to move back to your aunt in Florida or your mom in Florida or whatever. And you're not going back to the realm of the people you've been hanging out with temporarily through your job. And whereas if you are Donald Trump Jr., it's very hard to fail.
Exactly.
People you lose your job, you're going to, live in the pool house of some guy, and then you're going to have someone, and generally it's not to say it's that easy, but it's a world of where, I'm looking for a job, and someone in your circle, either a relative or family, knows someone someplace, somewhere, and that gives you a step up. Doesn't mean that you are not qualified. I mean, Donald Trump's an idiot. Like certain people are perfectly qualified.
No, that's the thing. Like it has nothing to yes, they are qualified, but so are a lot of other people who do not necessarily have those connections or, the ability financially to move to New York. And, I mean, let's be real. There is a reason why like 90% of professional television pundits are the children of someone famous or super rich. Mm-hmm. And that's even like on the left. I think there was like a period of time where practically everyone on MSNBC, other than I think like Joy Reid and I think I don't know if Rachel has like a Rachel Maddow was like a rich parent or anything, but like practically everyone else was the child of some like rich person. Like it was like Cuomo, and Anderson Cooper is CNN. Cuomo, Anderson Cooper, Mia Farrow's son, but like it was like all these people who like had famous parents. And that was
Ronan Farrow's very bright and very what he's in rooms and around people who's just like you disagree about his being very bright.
I think he is often a little too fast and loose with the facts for me, which bothers me because he was writing so much about sexual assault for a while. Like, and I did not like, I forget what it was. It was like one article in like the New York Times where he just got a lot of like, there was like he got some stuff wrong. And I was like,
well,
maybe this isn't for you.
Yes, that is.
I hate his face. Dude, I'm sorry. It's like the meanest. I'm sorry. We need to edit that out. It's like
it's okay. I don't know. I'm not talented.
And it's like fake blue contacts. That look like Frank Sinatra. You do not look like Frank. Get up. Mia Farrow looks like Frank Sinatra. Okay, let's be real here. They have the same face. That is why.
Yeah, I mean,
he's not too beautiful. He is also very good looking, but they look alike. Am I wrong?
This whole idea that somehow, because he does look like Mia Farrow's side of the family, I think the idea was that because he doesn't look as overtly much like Woody Allen's son,
yeah,
a joke that maybe he's someone else.
I know, but like I don't know. I thought that was like really mean to.
If you look closely enough, it's like, oh yeah, you could see some of Woody Allen there. It's just
always felt it was weirdly mean to Frank Sinatra's kids because, like, you know, he was like, he would have hypothetically been with Barbara. No, not Barbara. Barbara was his daughter. Whatever. Like, he was with his wife at the time that would have occurred. So, like, one of his wives. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, like, that was a little rude.
Yeah, it's like a weird.
I think she wasn't even dead yet. It's like, this is an awkward rumor to be like pushing. I found.
No,
at least wait till the bitch is dead. I think was my thought at the time. Like, oh, isn't it so cute? He's probably Frank Sinatra's son. Let's not mention the fact that he was married and his wife is still alive. I mean, we all know Frank Sinatra probably did cheat on his wives, but like,
I don't know. I think you should not like lead with that. The fact that, you know,
felt mean.
He is not obviously on friendly terms with his with his
I'm
father,
just saying, like,
sister.
I don't think that, like, you know, but Frank Sinatra's wife did anything to like be brought into this. Like,
yes, that
hurt anyone.
I hate it.
She's like minding her own business.
I hate his face was what you had said.
I know, I'm terrible, but
I mean, it is fine. I mean,
I don't like a smug face.
Yeah, I mean, he does look. He's a remarkably attractive.
Yeah.
I think people find him remarkably attractive. I mean, it's nice that he's. I mean, that's why he clearly was too attractive for people to believe that he's Woody Allen's son, right? So, even though,
but I'm just not my type.
Got it. You are
much more into the dude from Superstore.
Yeah, you are not. I guess Ronan Farrow's type either, which I guess.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is true. But I also, no blondes.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is. I don't know. I mean, I guess Redford as blonde men, like he was like of the type, and I guess Brad Pitt, but I always felt like blonde men were never.
Yeah. No.
As much. There's something. I felt like those are the
two. Robert Redford was fabulous looking. But just like in general,
generally speaking, blonde men were very rare. I felt like are very rarely it's not like Cary Grant, like George Clooney's. They're always sort of not, blondes. Yeah. Not to the extent that women who are blonde were. also like women who are redheads
are not as awesome. I'm kidding. Like that is.
I mean, I'm a fan of the brunettes. We've so I guess now I remember again back to the labor stuff. I really do resent the whole thing of trying to bring everyone back when it's been clear from the pandemic that people can work from home. And my favorite is that,
and they're doing just fine.
Well, aren't they saying that it should be considered a benefit to work in your own home for another company, and that you actually should be paid less, which makes literal no sense, because the company is saving far more in overhead.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it costs like using again, media companies would save so much money just letting people work from home instead of making everyone move to New York, paying people to like be able to live in New York, paying for rent and space in New York, or any place. Like it's actually that like remote work is a fucking like labor revelation, because you can then get people who are living anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
People don't have to upend their lives. I think it's actually so great, and that's part of the reason why they're fighting against it and putting out all these op-eds like, is working from home bad for you? Like, don't you need to stand around and talk to your coworkers?
Well, we talked a bit about this prior to recording, but whenever I think of the stuff that I often have a feeling of like, oh, I haven't had a real job. I was thinking, but I do work whenever. But I feel like, I guess, what I'm thinking of as like the job or it's just that office. It felt like it's so imprisoning. There's a place you have to go to. There's the awful commute.
Yeah,
you're in this, and there's all the workplace drama and stuff that's happening. That is like,
and again, it's better for the environment actually if people don't have to commute. Point there.
Yes. Well, I mean, the idea that everyone from everywhere needs to go to this one space, usually in a few square blocks at the same time, leave at the same time, just creating a situation where people are miserable. They're miserable when they get to work. They're miserable when they get home because the commutes are so bad. I live in Seattle, and we live technically, if I had to do it myself, I would do it. I would walk. We're like 3 miles away from downtown. I would sometimes pick up my son. I'd leave work and I'd stop riding and I'd go and pick up my son from when he was in preschool and bring him home when his mom was working late. And it was an hour on the bus, just sitting there on the bus, creeping with like the lady from Office Space, like on the walker getting past. Like, it's miserable. And that's if everything goes well. And inevitably there'd be like a bridge up or some kind of thing. And you get home and you're just miserable. And it's just like, why do this to ourselves? And I know it's going to take time. You have to build out the infrastructure or whatever, but because there's an infrastructure, like if everyone's in the office, they all eat lunch at the same places around here, and they all get coffee at the same places around that office, and they all do their happy hours at the same place around that office. Yeah. And that whole infrastructure will collapse. And then of course, downtowns, which already took a battering, if there's no longer people there, like they connect it with sort of the crime, or like because you have an area where everything's shuttered. Bigger cities can't really complain about that because you just put housing, just make those places housing. But the solution can't be like, continuing to ignore the fact that we've had major technological advances that makes this.
Well, this is the thing. Originally, like for years and years and years, people would talk about like, well, in the future, people won't need to work that much. We want to get to a point, like, they would, even like non-labor people would talk like, in the future, people are only going to have to work like 15 hours a week max. And part of the problem is that like, we're like trying to employ fuck tons of people, in jobs that we don't like actually have, rather than letting people, work shorter hours and hiring more people.
Yes. Like it's not a job worth a living wage because of 40 hours, which is an arbitrary determination anyway. So but if it was 20 hours, like, oh, that's lazy.
Like, we're not actually, we should be working towards working less.
I don't know. Well, and they've proven, like, people, an idea of like, you don't need to come in this day, which then if it's like, oh, well, things are slow, take off early or take off this day off because it's slow is considered, oh, well, we need to like obviously have too many people on staff. But if
that's a problem if it's hourly and people are counting on that wage.
Oh yeah, but they could also just say this: we need to produce X amount, like even in retail, right?
Yeah,
this is what is necessary to actually be able to do what we're doing, and if there's days where it's low enough, the volume for whatever reason, we let someone take off early. It doesn't mean we need to dock them. It's just that they were still contributing to the larger process, but instead it became we'd rather have Robin stand on the side or maybe.
Well, because we like Americans like the idea of people working. We like I hate to say we, but I don't. We like the idea of like people sort of like paying their dues and putting like suffering. We like the idea that like suffering leads to people being morally good. And that work leads to people being morally good. And everything gets individualized is part of the problem. Like, even like with student loans, what they do is they create like, oh, there's this like, this money, this thing that's going to help all these people, it's also going to go to someone that you hate and think is bad. Whenever we try and do something that helps people in general, this help is going to go to someone you hate and think is bad. And the only way that they can be not bad is to suffer enough in order to like learn their lesson. And this is very like weird backwards thing that we do instead of like, calming the hell down, and instead of doing everything sort of like piecemeal, being like, okay, we need this amount of doctors. We're not getting this amount of doctors. So maybe we need to make it free to become a doctor. We need this many teachers. We're not getting this many teachers, like this amount of teachers. Maybe we need to do things to push people to become teachers. Like, for instance, not sending them to jail or whatever for mentioning that gay people or black people, gay people or racism exist.
Soon admitting black people exist will cover that as well.
I don't see color.
Oh my God. So do you need help?
No.
Someone says you see, I don't see color. Really?
I'm wearing a bright orange shirt. I clearly see color, but
everyone is especially in Portland, they're always shocked. I always told you, if their kid would notice that I was black, and it'd be, they've made a mistake. If they're 3-year-old, your child this is a normal part of development, which is to notice how things are different and whatever. Quantifying difference is bad is what the problem is. Noticing it is not the problem.
Yeah, it's like when white people like go out of their way to like when describing a human person, like describe everything about them, like they don't mention that they're black because like that means I'm not racist if I don't mention that
he's wearing
the person I am trying to point out right now. It's so ridiculous. However, I will say, like, just a quick comment on my shirt. I am wearing a like festive Labor Day shirt. It is one of the original Sinatras Son Killer Coke t-shirts that we used to wear back in the day to protest the School of the Americas. So there's some aging info for me, although I think it was still called, it's the new weird term for it that is literally on the shirt right now, but I can't think of it. Win something, Winsec or something like that. It's terrible. But yeah, this was a big labor issue many, many years ago because, they maybe had some union workers killed in Colombia.
Well, thank you, Robin. I need to dart off
Yes.
now to pick up my son, even which would be a weird thing to do on a Sunday, but yet I'm doing it. But
Yes. So strange.
he's in school every day, basically. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Even on Sundays.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.